Good morning. We are very fortunate today, as you probably, some of you already realized, our community engagement expertise is already communicating with her colleagues. And
with my community, my new community.
Engaging with her new community. So I think one of the take-home lessons from today is really going to be, in your research, you will need to engage with a range of stakeholders. Some of those will be in your scientific discipline, but many will be among the community at large who need to understand, participate, contribute to, and have conversations with you to advance the scientific enterprise and the enterprise of health in which we all participate. So we're extraordinarily lucky today to have a very dear colleague from USC, Dr. Cecilia Patino-Sutton, who is an associate professor of preventive medicine with expertise in critical care and pulmonary, and also has significant expertise in education. She's actually an educational scholar at the associate professor level at USC, which is a great honor bestowed upon few of the faculty. She's a director of workforce development in translational science and the mentored KL2 program, which is for junior faculty emerging as investigators in clinical and translational science. And she's going to share her thoughts on best practices and ways to engage and have conversations with the community at large. So with that.
Thank you. So I titled what I would like to talk to you about, empowering the clinical translational researcher through community engagement to accelerate translation. So my first question to you is, does everyone understand translation, what that means? Everyone have a sense, kind of a sense? Okay, I'm going to go through it just in case. I wanted to see like the reaction to translation. Before I do that though, first of all, I don't have any disclosures. And second, I wanted to make a special slide to thank Janice for inviting me to come here. It's my first time coming to New York at all to give a lecture. So I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite cities. And I don't want to only thank her for inviting me. I want to thank her for being a role model for a lot of us who are in this field of educating clinician scientists, basic researchers, postdocs in the area of clinical translational research. She really is, for us who came later in the field, a role model that you know, everything that she does, we want to emulate. So I'm very thankful for her for giving me this opportunity, and for always, she's giving me many opportunities. So I just want you to know you have someone who's very special, who's a great mentor, and who really tries to lift people up to their best. So thank you, Janice.
I'll leave now.
So I have some suggestions for the session. So the first one is, please ask me questions as I go, if you have any. You don't have to ask me, but if you have, just raise your hand and ask me, and I'll stop. And that's just the way I teach all of my classes. Every session, I try for it to be very interactive. And because your questions help me gauge how I'm doing, and adjust if I need to. You know, if I see that you're asking questions that, oh, I said that and it didn't get through, so I adjust and explain again, explain it another way. So please do that. Feel free to do that. I might ask you some questions as we go, though, also. So be prepared if I call on you. I do that because I'm curious about you. As you saw, I couldn't, you know, the session hadn't started. I already wanted to know your name. I wanted to know who you are, what you do, a little bit what your field is. So I'm very curious about who's here. I want to know about your ideas about what I'm talking about. Is it interesting? Is it related at all to where you are in your career? Or is it completely, left field? And I also need your input so I can continue learning about this field. So again, if it can be interactive, is it okay for what we're doing here with the video? Is that okay to do that? Okay. So basically, what this whole session is about, talking about creating career development opportunities for researchers to facilitate the production of research findings that translate into improvements in human health in a timely manner. And there are many ways to do that. Janice has come up with many articles telling us best practices to train the clinical translational researcher on how to accelerate translation. But today we're going to talk about things related to community engagement, how community engagement can help the clinical translational researcher. And I'm not going to talk about the whole spectrum, but a lot of what our experience has been at USC. So I'm sure everyone maybe has seen some kind of figure like this, trying to explain what translation is and what the translational phases are. But if you haven't, I'm just going to go through them briefly. So the translational phases have been artificially divided into these boxes and kind of with an order. So researchers who do bench research, for example, identify a drug target in an animal in a cell. And those research findings have to go to the next phase, to first human studies. And that's what we call T1 type research. So, or the bench to bedside. But that's not enough, right? From there, those results in the first human studies have to go to the next phase, where we put out the intervention out there in the world, in the real world, and we have to really understand if what happened in a clinical, very, very controlled clinical trial actually is happening in the real world. So that goes to T2, T3, and then finally, does that intervention produce effects at the public health level? Does it reduce mortality? Does it increase quality of life? So this is kind of a very artificial way of seeing this, but it kind of helps us understand what translation is. It doesn't mean that it has to start here to be translation. Something can be published at the public health, and then it has to go back maybe to the bedside. So it's a come and go thing. So it's important to know this, because the whole goal of having these educational programs for clinical translational researchers is to provide opportunities for them to understand how to prevent delays in clinical translation. I think that's, as an educator, that's our goal. What do you need to learn to be able to identify how to prevent delays in clinical translation? So I'm going to show you, I want to show you, remember this is all about community engagement. I want to show you a little bit about the community where I work. So this is a picture of, what's it? It's kind of, could be many cities, right? But I'm at USC. What city is that? LA, good. So this is a picture of LA. And in LA, we have 10.4 million residents. Of those residents, there are 140 cultures. 224 languages are spoken, and 45% of the population is Hispanic. So I was thinking about this and comparing this to New York, which is probably pretty similar. The only difference, I think, you probably have these many cultures and languages, maybe a less amount of Hispanics and more amount of African Americans or Africans. But I was thinking that in some ways our cities are similar, very diverse. We have 8 areas of LA County. I work here in the metro area. That's where USC is. And I live north, a little bit north, east of that in Pasadena. So as you can see how our city is conformed, we have a unique opportunity to understand health in the context of diversity. So because we have this population, the confirmation of our population is this way. Our CTSA, or our Clinical Translational Science Institute in Los Angeles at USC, has this very unique context. And because of that, we took advantage of that. And when we designed what our mission was going to be within the big consortium of clinical translational science institutes across the US, we said that our emphasis was going to be on community engagement. And that's because of the diversity of our population, but also because at USC we have a very, very strong community engagement core. I personally am not a community engagement specialist, but I interact a lot with our community engagement cores, and together we collaborate to develop educational efforts for the trainees that are in my program. So we have a very strong relationship with the community engagement core at our CTSI. And our educational goal is to accelerate translation by incorporating a community perspective to research while training, while the trainees are in the training program. So what do we mean by community? What do you think? A catchment area, yeah. That could be a community. Any other ideas of how you would define a community? A common something, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Because we say this a lot, right? Community, community, community. But what is a community? Anybody else? Well, you were both spot on. So a community can be defined as a group of people who are united by at least one, but perhaps more than one common characteristics, including maybe geography, ethnicity, shared interests, values, experience, traditions. So there are many ways that a group of people can come together and be called a community. I want you to know that because it's not just one type. There are many types of communities. So let me tell you a little bit of some of my communities, at least what I think are my communities. I think the academic setting, people who work in academics, is a community that I'm part of. It's a strong community. I've been academic since I graduated from med school. I started teaching in my university and have been part of that ever since. So the academic setting is an important community for me. Within that community, the people who are specialized in education, that's a subgroup that's the past 8 years, a very strong community for me. People who are in pulmonary disease, clinician scientists, that's another very big population for me, a community for me. But I also am Hispanic, and I relate to that community very much. But within the Hispanics, I relate to South Americans. And within South Americans, Argentines. I'm from Argentina originally. So it's interesting, you see that, and I'm sure that you could all come up with, 3 or 4 communities that you have strong ties with. And it's interesting how you can shift from one to the other according to the circumstance. For example, right now, I'm in my academic setting. Now, if anyone were to be interested in the World Cup that just finished, I would be Argentine and discussing with you why Argentina did not get to the finals. I can switch perfectly well to that community, even within the academic setting. It was really interesting during the World Cup. Is anyone here a fan of the World Cup? Oh, quite a few. So my husband, who's in the back, hi John. My husband, who's in the back, is American. Before I met him, he had no interest in soccer or football. Now he's like a huge Argentine fan and has become part of that community. So just to give you the sense that we are all parts of different communities, and we can shift, you know, what community we are part of, where we're emphasizing throughout our lives. So I just wanted to, I chose this to kind of represent what community is. You know, it's some coming together, holding hands, and not necessarily, you know, that we love each other, although I do love my academic setting, I do love my Argentine community, but something that really, it's kind of like a glue. There's something there that keeps us together. So what are some of your communities? Is anyone willing to tell me? I told you a lot of mine. Is anyone willing to tell me some of yours?
Many of us in clinical education share we would love to meet our friends again at the annual meeting. So that's a very strong community.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Anyone who goes to an annual meeting, that's another community, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Brooklynite? Tell me, I don't know what that is. Brooklynite. After this meeting, we're going to stay 4 days in New York, and Brooklyn is definitely one of the places. So you might give me some recommendations of how to become a Brooklynite. Anybody else?
I'm a musician as well, so
What type of musician?
I play bass guitar.
What kind of music?
Indie rock.
Nice. So do you play like in a band? Do you have like a...
I did. I don't anymore, but I was in like a touring rock.
Nice. Does anybody else have a community outside of academics, hospital, medicine, any research? No one else? Are you too shy to reveal yourself? No? Janice?
I do a cappella singing, and I was a singer.
No way. Are you a soprano?
Contralto.
Contralto. Wow. I did not know that. Okay. So now what do we mean by community engagement? So community engagement is a continuum of approaches to engaging communities of place and or interest in activities aimed at improving population health. So community engagement in the area of health, right? So I'm going to read that again. So engagement is related to a set of approaches to engage communities of place or of interest in activities aimed at improving population health. Okay? So in this context, or at least in the context where I work with, there's two communities that we're talking about here, and this is what I'm going to refer to through the rest of the session. The academic community interacting with the non-academic community to try to come up with best practices together to improve human health, right? So I just want to make you aware that in my Clinical Translational Science Institute, we have, again, a very strong community engagement group, has a lot of experience doing this, and they have created this toolkit for developing community partnerships. I'm not going to talk about this today, but I highly recommend that you go to our website or the NCAT's website or the CLIC website to download. I just went through it the other day. It's really a very nice document that tells you step by step on how to create these community partnerships. How many of you have ever done a project where there was some community engagement to it? Janice, Brooklynite. So what was your project?
This project was working with rural municipalities in the state who wanted to start drug courts with an alternative system for people who are found guilty of drug-related crimes. So they consulted with professors, practitioners at my university on how to get this.
Thanks. And Janice?
So I'm, and I hope the online participants can hear, so it may be worth repeating what she said, but I take this as a much broader conversation. So I'm an interventional trialist, taking new discoveries in the laboratory and applying it to pilot initiatives in man. And so I think that involves engagement, because patients who participate in clinical trials need to understand and participate in the process of the development of those trials, and to understanding the goals, and the goals should be informed by the needs of non-academic participants. So while I have not personally led a quote community engagement study, which in that diagram you showed is partitioned to the right, it's really integrated, should be integrated throughout. So that's
I absolutely agree.
it.
That is a different community, right, than the academic community, although they're in an academic setting because that's where you work, but they're another community of patients, right? So I think that's a really good example of people right here where you can interact with a different community. Thanks. So, incorporating community engagement into the training programs at USC. This is what I really do. This is what I think about all the time, of how we're going to, what are we going to offer the trainees who come into our programs? What opportunities are we going to offer them to learn how to engage the community into their research? So for this, we've created curriculum for the trainees. We have courses for them, formal courses, seminars. Of course, we have our community engagement core has consultations. So if you were at my institution and wanted to start with a community engaged project, you could ask for a request for a consult and talk with our community engagement people and try to figure out how do you start? How do you start engaging the community? Where do you start? And they have connections with many communities across LA County, and they would start, asking you questions, and what type of community do you need, and why do you need, and they would start opening the network with you and helping you identify those people. And then what I really want to talk to you about is something that we created, the educational core of our CTSI with the community engagement, something we call the Community Mentorship Program. So we started this program. The idea of this program started in 2013, and in 2014 we said, okay, let's do it. So we did a proof of concept and enrolled 3 people into the Community Mentorship Program. And we were fortunate enough that even though the sample size was very small, academic medicine was interested in the idea of what we were doing. And so we named the article the Community Mentorship Program, providing community engagement opportunities for early stage clinical and translational scientists to facilitate research translation. We really thought that if we connected our scholars or people who are in our program with a mentor from the community, and that person would help them get into the communities that they needed, we thought that this would probably be a great way to engage the community. So we kind of are reversing the thing here. We're asking the community to become mentors for our academic trainees to help them navigate community engagement. So that was a pretty novel thing at that time, 3 or 4 years ago. There are some other institutions that are doing it now, but we're still in the first phases to trying to understand what the best practices are for this. So here you have a picture of one of our scholars, Liz, to your right, and her community mentor. So the objective of the program, at least at the very beginning, was that they would get together, the community mentor would help the scholar find an opportunity in the community to talk about their research and to ask those community members to help her resolve a problem that she had. In this case, Liz is a emergency care doc. Her research is in diabetes, so she receives a lot of people with diabetes who are not controlled in the emergency room. And so she said, there's so many and they come so many times, I have to find a way to actually, when I set them off, to see if I can find a way to help them control their diabetes so they don't come back to the emergency room. So she designed a trial where she used mobile phones, very simple mobile phones, to text message the patients, monitor them, and help them comply with their the diabetic management plans. And so when she started designing this, although she knows Spanish, most of her community are Hispanics and don't speak English. So she had to come up with messages in Spanish that the community would accept and would help them comply. So we partnered her with her community mentor, who's a Spanish speaker, who took her to a session with community health workers. And she presented her research. She presented the messages that she had crafted, and the health workers gave her many ideas on how to change the wording of the messages so that it would be, so that the population she was serving, it would be much more aligned to what they understand, and you know, the exact words that would help them understand exactly what she was trying to do. And this was very successful. She changed many of her messages, and her study showed very positive results. So this is the summary of the results of the paper that we published. I'm not going to go through it into detail, but what I wanted to show you is that we align the people in our program, in our KL2 program, who are all assistant professors. Some are clinicians. They're all clinicians, but some are clinical docs, and some are, the second one was an occupational therapist. We chose these people as a proof of concept because they were already doing research in diverse populations. So you can see the first one was doing research with the Filipino adolescents, second young Latinos, and the third Latino adults. Our community, so we identified the scholars, our community engagement colleagues identified the mentors for them, and together we followed them throughout 1 year, monitored them, made sure they signed a memorandum of understanding with all their goals. We monitored them and made sure that they were meeting the goals, and after 1 year, we measured outcomes. And just to show you, read for you a couple of them. The first one, presented research to a leadership and staff of a key local Filipino community-based organization. this is one of the most interesting things that she thinks I did because of the program. She needed, she was forming an advisory board, and she wanted to have Filipinos in that advisory board, and she wanted to have some that didn't speak English, because a lot of the patients or the individuals in her study did not speak English. So she was able, through the connections with her mentor, identify a person who would be willing to be on her advisory board, and a translator for Tagalog, right? Tagalog, right? So that during the advisory board, that person could communicate with the rest of the advisory board. So you can imagine how complex this starts to be, but really she found, through her community mentor, she found the right person, and this worked perfectly for her. Just an example of the second one, she presented her research to the local diabetes education programs that form part of Los Angeles Diabetes Alliance. And then her mentor assisted her in the recruitment of research individuals for her study. So I think that has been another big role that these community mentors have really helped the scholars in our program, to help them find the right places to recruit their participants in the study. And then the third one, an example, their mentor, the community, the scholar and the mentor co-presented a workshop for promotoras. Does everyone know what a promotora is? It's just a community health worker. So they presented a workshop to this population in Spanish in a statewide conference together. And then together they worked collaboratively and developed a multiple sclerosis promotoras training manual. So yep.
Just maybe you're going to tell us about this, but in this model, the individual mentors appear to have some sophistication already. And so I'm wondering how you work to develop the range of available, how you engaged individuals to become mentors. What was the process? Were they already self-selected? Was there a
so our community engagement group are the ones who selected them. They have this whole network of people that they work with for over I think it's over 300 organizations in LA. So they have a lot of connections. So they were the ones that identified according to the type of research that our scholars were doing and the possibilities that they had in the network.
And is there an online tool that a given trainee can go to? And just wondering.
I wish, not yet, right? This is very preliminary, right? So yes, that would be great, right? But we're not there yet.
And the last question in this regard is, as the faculty progressed in their mentor, ultimately perhaps to independent or from mentor to another mentor, did they include these individuals in subsequent grant applications?
Yes, and that has been the beauty. So something that started from us, artificially putting these people together, has created relationships so strong that they have all, at least these three and another one, they have all continued to work with their community mentors.
Is there compensation for the community mentors?
Yes. During this first phase, where they had to work 1 year, we paid them $500. So I want to show you one example that this is, of all of them, this is the one that still works with her community mentor, but it has exploded, the amount of work that they've done together. So this is Liliana Amezcua. She was a KL2 scholar. She's already out of the program, and at that time was an assistant professor of neurology. Her area of expertise is multiple sclerosis. And then her community mentor is Mercy Willard, who's a MPH and a director of community outreach of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. So this is someone who has a lot of experience not doing the research, but being in a society that's dedicated to the disease that Liliana is working with. So originally, when Liliana came into our program, her conceptual model of what she was trying to understand, which was early disability in the population of Hispanics with multiple sclerosis, she had a very simple conceptual model. Hispanic ethnicity had a relationship with, is related to the percent of Amerindian Asian genetic ancestry, and this could be related to increased spinal cord involvement, and this could lead to early disability. And that genetic ancestry, the pathway to involving the spinal cord was mediated by IL-6. So a very simple model, and this is when she came into our program, this was it. Through this partnership, Liliana started working a lot with Mercy and getting involved in this national society. And they asked her to do workshops for Spanish-speaking healthcare workers. Liliana Amezcua is Mexican, has Mexican heritage, speaks perfect Spanish and English, so that was something that she could easily do. Although she didn't have any experience in having these types of conversations with community members. She was someone who was focused on the genetics and never thought that she would do this community outreach. Turns out she's pretty good at it. And because of that first experience, you know, they thought, you know, maybe I should start doing focus groups with Latinos who have multiple sclerosis to tell me what their experiences are. In addition to the genetics, what their experiences are and what barriers they have for improving their health status. She had never done a focus group in her life. She learned how to do them, and it seems like she also does this really well. So after many focus groups and all these workshops, her conceptual model of the disease changed, right? It's much more complex now. It has the genetic aspects, but it also includes now the perceptions of the disease of the patients, acculturation. Does everyone know what acculturation is? No? Anyone have a thought? Yes?
Yours and the culture around you.
Huh.
I don't know. It's hard to.
Yeah, it's exactly that. For example,
Can you repeat that so the online people?
so I'll say, yeah. So acculturation means the uptake, you know, of characteristics of another culture that wasn't yours originally. A typical example is someone who comes from another country, comes to live to the US, and some people keep eating the food that they ate in their original country, right? They don't transition to the American diet. They stay with their own. Others make some concessions, you know, so they're partially acculturated, at least in regards to diet. And some make the full acculturation. They stop. They want to be really part of this society in the way that, you know, at least wherever they're living, the Americans are eating, and they do full acculturation. So you can imagine that acculturation is a spectrum, and that lower, medium, or higher levels of acculturation could affect disease, right? So this was something that she had never thought about putting into her conceptual model until she entered the program. And so she has a very nice schema here where you can see that she has each of these arrows are a specific aim. And after she presented this, she got a very nice foundation grant, multiple sclerosis foundation grant type R01 amount of money to actually prove this model. So she also, because of this, started taking a more multidisciplinary approach of understanding the disease. So she really harnessed everything that we have at USC to help her understand disability in the Latino population. So she partnered with a faculty member from Preventive Medicine, who's the head of Immigrant Health Initiative. She also partnered with people from Global Health at USC. And interesting, she partnered with the School of Cinema at USC. And what they did between her community mentor and herself, they came up with the idea, after all the information that they accumulated through the focus groups, through the workshops, with all the diverse communities, the health workers, people, Hispanics with multiple sclerosis, they came up with the idea of developing an intervention to increase awareness of MS among the Hispanic population. And so Liliana has a great personality and is capable of being so enthusiastic that she gets a lot of people to work for her for free. And so a lot of these are postdocs in the School of Cinema. And so they created a movie. It took about 1.5 years, and they developed a movie to try to increase awareness about multiple sclerosis in the Latino population. So now I thought this was a really nice example of an innovative way of using the engagement with the community to inform your research and to give you like these really cool ideas on what interventions to develop to tackle the clinical problem. So the film won a prize. The National Multiple Sclerosis Society presented Liliana with the Volunteer Hall of Fame Health Professional Award. And we presented together during a CTSA session in 2016. We presented together the program and how it had impacted her. And NIH and CATS liked the story and wrote it up, which is nice for us. And so I'm going to end on so I've talked a lot about how it impacted her and how she's going forward with her research. But I want to tell you, just to finish, how it impacted us as a program. So we started thinking, we did this. We started thinking, how are other CTSAs doing this? Is anybody else doing this type of community engagement with community mentors in their sites? So we got together with 11 other sites, mostly people who, CTSAs who are on the West Coast, and we partnered them, and our goal right now is try to develop best practice for engaging the community through community mentors and through other processes. And so we said, let's write a grant together. We did not get funding, but we're going to push forward. So just let me tell you some other things that other CTSAs do. A lot of them don't do anything. They don't engage with the community engagement cores or community engagement at all to kind of develop educational opportunities for the scholars. But the majority do. So a lot of them have community engagement consultation services with their community engagement core. They've created community engagement seminar series for the scholars. They have brought in community judges for the trainees when they do their annual research presentations. They bring in people from the community who have expertise to give them feedback. Some have formed community advisory boards for the KL2 scholars. Each KL2 scholar has a community advisory board that helps them also, in addition to their other mentors. Some align scholars with community leaders, right? And remember here, we're defining community as, very big. It could be the industry. It could be a church. It could be any type of community. And then community mentors on the mentoring team, which is what we have started doing. And some others actually are doing it also. So, of course, there are barriers for the sustainability of training, for our training programs where we have these partnerships. The people who are in the course, community engagement, and they change over time. So not everyone keeps the excitement of trying to put this forward. The investment in the program is demanding and needs designated persons. It's not this little add-on that you can add to your training program. You really have to be invested because there's a lot of monitoring going on, especially at the beginning. You need money, right? And our course don't have a lot of extra money for these kind of demanding programs. We have yet to see if the trainees across the complete translational spectrum would comply with the initiative. Remember, I told you we picked people who were already doing projects related to diverse populations. But if we have a trainee who's doing research in diverse mice, would they be willing to have us pair them with a community mentor to think about very early on, what could you do to bring in diversity to whatever experiment you do to try to accelerate that translation to first human studies. I talk with our basic researchers all the time. They don't like talking about this very much. But I think it's a possibility. I think we're not ready as a community, but I think any scholar at any stage could take advantage of a community mentor, for example. And then the variability of return on investment across the trainees. I showed you our STAR trainee. The other 3 that have gone through the proof of concept have been successful. Not as successful, but have been successful. But if we did bring in other scholars, would be as successful. So the take-home messages are the impact of actively involving the community into the training programs has yet to be fully explored and evaluated. I've just given you a glimpse. I'm very proud of what we've done, but we still have to do a lot of work to make sure that we can implement this at a large scale. However, NIH and other entities are interested. When we sent in the publication for academic medicine, I wasn't sure that they were going to be interested, and they took it up right away. And academic medicine takes a long time to publish, and it was pretty fast. And we got a lot of help from them on editing the article, which I was very surprised. So they were very interested in. The preliminary outcomes are very exciting, but we need more experience. And with that, I end. I hope I've just increased your excitement for community engagement into being part of training programs to help accelerate translation of any type of intervention so that we can more quickly improve the health of our populations. Thank you.